Sarah's hands shook as she gripped the fence post, but she did not stop. Blood ran down her palm where the wire had cut her, red drops falling into the dry dirt. Behind her, she heard laughter. She turned and saw 3 young men from town, sitting on their horses, watching her. "Look at her," one man said, grinning wide. "Doing man's work again. No wonder nobody wants to marry her." Sarah's face turned hot with shame, but instead of running inside like they expected, she did something nobody thought she would do. She picked up her hammer, walked straight toward the broken fence post and swung it hard. Once, twice, 3 times. The post went deep into the ground, solid and strong. The men stopped laughing. They stared at her, mouths open. "There," Sarah said, her voice steady even though her heart pounded fast. "Fixed, just like I fix everything else around here since nobody else will." She did not wait for their answer. She turned her back on them and walked toward the barn, leaving them speechless behind her. Inside the barn, alone at last, Sarah leaned against the wooden wall and let her tears fall. Her chest hurt with old pain, pain that came back every single day, sharp as the wire that cut her hand. She was 28 years old. Too old, the town said, for any man to want her. Her golden-haired sisters had husbands and bobbies. Sarah had blisters and a father too sick to help her. Plain Sarah, they called her in whispers that were not quiet enough. The unmarried sister. She wiped her face with her sleeve, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek. Outside, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky orange and red, like the color of her bleeding hand. Sarah looked up at the darkening sky and whispered the same words she said every night, words that had lost all their hope. "No man wants a plain woman who works like a farmhand." But tomorrow, everything would change. Dust rose from the road as a stranger rode into Willow Creek on a tired brown horse. Sarah looked up from the water pump, wiping sweat from her forehead. The man swung down from his saddle slow and easy, like someone who had ridden a long way. "Name's Jesse Cole," he said, tipping his worn hat. "Looking for work." Sarah's father, leaning on his cane, studied the stranger careful. "Can you handle cattle, son?" "Yes, sir. Handled them my whole life." That was how Jesse came to work the Mills Ranch. Days passed. Sarah watched him from far away, careful not to be noticed. She saw how he worked hard from morning to night. She saw how he never complained, even when the sun burned hot enough to make a man dizzy. One evening, Sarah knelt by the broken fence again, her hands already bleeding from the sharp wire. She heard boots walking toward her and stiffened, ready for more laughing, more cruel words. But it was Jesse. He knelt down beside her without a word first, just looking at her bloody hands. "Let me help you with that," he said, his voice gentle as a summer breeze. Sarah's whole body went still with surprise. "I don't need help," she said quickly, though her voice trembled. "I know you don't," Jesse said, a small smile on his face, "but maybe you'd like it anyway." Nobody had ever asked what Sarah would like. Her eyes filled with tears she tried hard to hide. They worked together in silence as the sky turned orange, then purple, then dark. When the last post stood strong, Jesse stood up and looked at her steady, like he was seeing something nobody else had ever seen. "Miss Sarah," he said, sudden nervousness in his voice now, "would you have supper with me tomorrow evening, down by the creek, just us?" Sarah's heart pounded loud in her chest. "Why would you want that?" she whispered. "Everyone calls me plain." Jesse stepped closer, his eyes serious and warm at the same time. "I don't see plain," he said quietly. "I see someone worth knowing." Sarah stood in front of the small, cracked mirror in her room, smoothing down her mother's old blue dress with shaking hands. Her heart beat fast, faster than it had beat in years. Was this really happening? Was a man truly waiting for her down by the creek? She walked slow through the tall grass, her boots wet with evening dew. Then she saw him. Jesse had built a small fire, and the orange flames danced against the darkening sky. Beans and bread sat warming near the fire, simple food but made with careful hands. They sat together on an old blanket. At first, Sarah could not find words. She was not used to being someone's company. She was only used to being someone's help. But Jessie asked soft questions. "What did your mother teach you? What makes you happy, Sarah?" Slowly, like a flower opening after a long winter, Sarah began to talk. She told him about her mother's death. She told him about years of being called plain, years of aching loneliness nobody saw. Tears rolled down her cheeks as old pain poured out at last. Jesse did not look away, like everyone else always did. He reached over and held her trembling hand tight. "You are not plain to me," he said, his voice steady and sure. "You have the strongest, kindest soul I have ever known." Suddenly dark clouds rushed across the sky. Thunder cracked loud, shaking the ground beneath them. Rain poured down hard and fast, soaking them both completely. They ran together, laughing despite the storm, back toward the porch. Standing close, wet and breathless, lightning lit up the sky behind them like fire in the clouds. "Sarah," Jesse said, his voice shaking now with real feeling, "I'm just a poor cowboy, but I would be honored more than anything to court you properly, to love you the way you deserve." Sarah looked into his eyes, and for the first time in many years, hope rose warm inside her chest. "Yes," she whispered against the falling rain. "Yes, Jesse Cole, I would like that very much." Word spread fast through Willow Creek like fire through dry grass. People whispered behind their hands. "The new cowboy is courting plain Sarah Mills. He must be a fool." Jesse heard the whispers too, but he did not care one bit. Every Sunday he brought Sarah wildflowers, picked with his own rough hands. Every evening, tired from work, he still made time to sit with her, to listen, to laugh with her under the darkening sky. Slowly something changed in Sarah. Not her face, for her face stayed the same as always, but her eyes grew bright like stars. Her back stood tall and proud instead of bent from years of shame. Her smile came easier, warmer, more often than before. People who once laughed now stared in wonder. They began to see what Jesse had always seen, a strong woman with a heart full of gold, hidden beneath years of cruel words. 6 months passed. On a cool autumn evening, Jesse led Sarah back to the same creek where they shared their first supper together. The evening sky turned golden, painting everything warm and soft. Jesse got down on one knee, his hands trembling slightly. "Sarah Mills," he said, his voice thick with feeling, "you were never plain to me. You were always the brightest thing in this whole town. Will you marry me?" Sarah's tears fell fast, happy tears this time, healing tears instead of painful ones. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with joy. "1,000 times yes." They married that winter in a small church filled with wildflowers, even though snow covered the ground outside. Sarah's sisters cried at the wedding, finally understanding what true love really meant. The town that once whispered plain now called her something new. Sarah Cole, the luckiest woman in Willow Creek. Not because Jesse rescued her from loneliness, but because he helped her finally see her own worth. Every year on that same evening, Jesse and Sarah walked back down to the creek together, remembering the night a new cowboy looked past what everyone else saw and found something truly precious instead.